The smell of fresh bread always reminded me of better days, back when the Sanders family bakery meant something more than just profits and betrayal. I stood in the doorway of what used to be my sanctuary, watching my sister Selena bark orders at our new staff like some corporate dictator. My name is Faith, and 6 months ago, I lost everything I held dear to the one person I thought I could trust most in this world. Faith, you're blocking the entrance, Selena snapped, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floors our father had installed himself. Either help or leave. I bit my tongue and moved aside, clutching the stack of invoices I'd come to drop off. The same invoices that had kept me up all night, my stomach churning at what I discovered hidden within their numbers. Actually, we need to talk, I said, following her toward the office that used to belong to Dad. There's something wrong with these accounts. Selena barely glanced at me as she typed away on her phone. Eleanor handles the books now. Take it up with her. Eleanor's the one who brought this to my attention. I dropped the stack of papers onto her desk, spreading out several highlighted sections. Care to explain why we're paying triple the market rate for flour to a company that doesn't seem to exist? That got her attention. Selena's perfectly manicured fingers froze mid-text, her eyes narrowing. Since when do you care about supplier contracts? Since Dad died and you somehow convinced the lawyer that you should have controlling interest in the bakery. I shot back, my voice trembling. I may only own 30% now, but I still have a right to know where our money's going. Our money? Selena laughed, the sound sharp and hollow. The money that keeps this place running comes from my investors, my connections. While you were playing around with sourdough starters and vintage recipes, I was modernizing this business. The door opened, and Eleanor poked her head in, her gray streaked hair pulled back in its usual tight bun. Faith? Vincent's here to see you. I'd never been so grateful for an interruption. Vincent stood in the hallway, his familiar presence instantly calming. He'd been our family's lawyer for years, and more importantly, he'd been the only one who'd voiced concerns about Selena's takeover. Found something interesting in the old storage room, he said quietly, holding up a leather-bound ledger I'd never seen before. Your father kept separate books. Might want to take a look. My hands shook as I took the ledger. Where was this during the inheritance proceedings? Hidden behind a false panel. Maintenance found it while fixing a pipe. Vincent glanced toward Selena's office. Be careful with that information, Faith. Some things, once revealed, can't be undone. I nodded, tucking the ledger into my bag. As I headed for the front door, I passed the wall of family photos Selena hadn't gotten around to replacing yet. Mom and Dad smiled out from behind the glass, flour on their aprons, pride in their eyes. Next to them, two little girls in matching aprons held up freshly baked cookies. Selena and me, back when we were still sisters, in more than just name. You're making a mistake, Beckett said later that evening, watching me pore over the ledger in his apartment. My best friend since college, he knew better than anyone how much the bakery meant to me. Going after Selena could destroy everything your parents built. She's already destroying it, I argued, pointing to a series of entries. Look at these numbers. Dad was meticulous about everything. These new suppliers Selena's using, they're shell companies. She's inflating costs and pocketing the difference. Beckett leaned forward, his expression grim. You need more than just suspicions. You need proof. That's why I called Eleanor, I said, pulling out my phone to show him the text messages. She's been gathering evidence for months. And Zara, remember her? The head baker Selena fired last month? She's willing to talk about what she saw. Faith, Beckett's voice softened. Are you sure this is about the money? Or is it about proving Selena wrong for pushing you aside? I stared at the old photo I kept in my wallet. Dad teaching me how to braid challah bread, my small hands covered in flour. Selena watching from the corner, with that look in her eyes I never understood until now. It's about justice, I said finally. Dad built this bakery on honesty and hard work. Every recipe, every tradition, it meant something. Selena's turning it into just another soulless chain store, and she's doing it by stealing from our family's legacy. The ledger felt heavy in my hands, its pages filled with secrets that could change everything. As I traced Dad's familiar handwriting, I made a decision. Selena might have won the first round, but she had no idea what was coming. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is served fresh out of the oven. Okay, Beckett said, reaching for his laptop. Let's make a plan. These transactions don't make any sense, Vincent said, spreading the documents across his office desk. Eleanor stood beside him, pointing at various entries, with a pen that trembled slightly in her hand. Look at this pattern, she said. Every major supplier was replaced within 2 months of Selena taking control. The new ones all trace back to the same address in Delaware. I paced the room, my fingers fidgeting with my mother's old apron string I'd taken to carrying in my pocket. Can we prove it's illegal? Vincent adjusted his glasses, frowning at the paperwork. It's definitely fraudulent. She's essentially paying herself through these shell companies, inflating costs to skim money off the top. The question is, can we prove she knew what she was doing? She knows, Eleanor said firmly. Last week, I overheard her on the phone with someone named Frankie, discussing profit margins that don't match our official books. A knock at the door made us all jump. Vincent quickly gathered the papers as his assistant poked her head in. Ms. Sanders is here for her appointment. My heart stopped. Selena! The other Ms. Sanders, the assistant clarified, and I exhaled. So, that's my cue to leave, Eleanor said, gathering her things. Faith, remember what we discussed. Be careful who you trust with this information. I nodded, watching her slip out the back door just as Selena strutted in, wearing a blazer that probably cost more than I made in a month. Well, isn't this cozy? She said, eyeing the scattered papers on Vincent's desk. Having a little family meeting without me? Quarterly review, Vincent said smoothly. Faith still owns 30% of the business. She has a right to be involved in these discussions. Selena's perfectly painted lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Of course. Speaking of business, I wanted to discuss the grand reopening next month. We're rebranding completely. New logo, new menu, new everything. What about Mom's recipes? I couldn't help asking. The ones customers have been coming back for since we were kids? Too costly, too time-consuming. Selena waved her hand dismissively. We're streamlining operations. Everything will be standardized, prepared in a central kitchen, and distributed to all locations. All locations? Vincent and I asked simultaneously. Selena's smile widened. Didn't I mention? I've secured funding for expansion. By this time next year, we'll have 5 new stores across the city. The Sanders name is going places, little sister. My phone buzzed. A text from Beckett. Found something. Meet me at Zara's Cafe ASAP. Excuse me, I said, standing up. I have another appointment. Don't forget about tomorrow's staff meeting, Selena called after me. 9 a.m. sharp. Though I suppose punctuality was never your strong suit. I found Beckett and Zara huddled over a laptop in the back of her small coffee shop. The smell of cardamom and coffee filled the air, so different from the artificial vanilla scent Selena had introduced at our bakery. Show her, Beckett said as soon as I sat down. Zara turned the laptop toward me. Remember when Selena fired me for inconsistent quality? The real reason was because I started asking questions about our new suppliers. Look at this email chain I managed to save. My eyes widened as I read through the messages. They were between Selena and someone named Frankie Joseph, discussing profit margins and kickbacks from suppliers. This Frankie person, I said slowly. Eleanor mentioned hearing Selena talk to them. He's her business partner in the shell companies, Zara explained. I did some digging. He has a history of similar schemes with other family businesses. The grand reopening, Beckett said suddenly. That's when we need to make our move. All the investors will be there, the press. And the auditors, I added, an idea forming. Vincent mentioned the health department, and financial auditors always coordinate visits for major restaurant reopenings. Zara leaned forward, her eyes sparkling. I still have contacts in the industry. One anonymous tip about financial irregularities. We'd need solid proof, Beckett cautioned. Something that can't be explained away. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my recent photos. Like this? I showed them the picture I'd taken of Dad's ledger compared to the current books. The differences are right there in black and white. Faith, Zara said softly, are you sure you want to do this? It could get ugly. I thought about the staff meeting tomorrow, about watching Selena dismantle everything our parents had built, piece by piece. She's already made it ugly, I replied. I'm just making it honest. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Eleanor. Found something big. Meet tonight after closing. I showed the others the message. Beckett whistled low. Looks like the pieces are falling into place, he said. Question is, are you ready for what happens when they do? I touched Mom's apron string in my pocket, drawing strength from the worn fabric. Ready or not, it's time for the truth to come out. All of it. The staff meeting was exactly as soul-crushing as I'd expected. I sat in the back of our converted dining room, watching Selena pace in front of a PowerPoint presentation filled with charts and corporate buzzwords. As you can see, our new streamlined process will increase efficiency by 40%, she announced, clicking to the next slide. The central kitchen concept eliminates the need for skilled bakers at each location. But what about custom orders? I couldn't stop myself from asking. Mrs. Chen has been ordering her son's birthday cake from us for 15 years. She likes watching us decorate it. Selena's smile tightened. The new system will offer standardized customization options. Standardized customization! I stood up, blood rushing to my face. Do you even hear yourself? This isn't some franchise operation, Selena. This is Mom and Dad's. Was Mom and Dad's, she cut me off sharply. And look where that got them, barely breaking even, working themselves to death over custom orders and personal touches. The room fell silent. Even the new employees who never knew our parents seemed to hold their breath. They were happy, I said quietly. And so were their customers. Happy doesn't pay the bills, Faith. Selena's voice dripped with condescension. But then, you wouldn't know about that, would you? Too busy playing with flour and sugar while I handled the real business. The memory hit me like a slap. 16 years old, standing in this same room, listening to Selena and Dad argue about college. Business school is a waste of money, Dad had said. The bakery is about heart, not spreadsheets. The bakery is dying, teenage Selena had shot back. You're too stubborn to see it, but I won't let your pride ruin this family. Now, looking at my sister's cold expression, I realized she'd been planning this takeover since that day. Meeting dismissed, Selena announced. Except you, Faith. We need to talk. The room cleared quickly. I stayed in my chair, gripping the armrests. Nye, I know what you're doing, Selena said once we were alone. Eleanor told me about your little investigation. My heart stopped. Eleanor is smarter than you. She knows which side her bread is buttered on. Selena perched on the edge of a table, examining her manicure. Did you really think you could prove anything? I've had lawyers review every transaction. Everything is perfectly legal. Legal doesn't make it right, I shot back. What would Mom say if she could see what you've done to her recipes? Mom's dead, Selena said flatly. And her outdated recipes would have killed this business too. Face it, Faith, you're living in the past. The world doesn't want artisanal bread and hand-piped roses anymore. They want convenience, consistency, and Instagram-worthy designs. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably Beckett wondering why I wasn't at our planned meeting. I ignored it. You're wrong, I said, standing up. People still care about quality and tradition. They care about the stories behind their food. Stories don't pay mortgages. Selena stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Here's a story for you. Little sister tries to sabotage family business out of jealousy, ends up losing her remaining shares when big sister is forced to buy her out to protect the company. How's that for tradition? Is that a threat? It's a warning. She smiled, all teeth and no warmth. Drop whatever you're planning, Faith. You're not cut out for this game. I walked out without another word, my hands shaking as I called Beckett. Where are you? He answered immediately. Zara and I have been waiting. Eleanor's working for Selena. I cut him off, hurrying down the street. She told her everything. Shit! I heard him relay the information to Zara. Okay, change of plans. Come to my place. And Faith? Watch your back. 20 minutes later, I sat on Beckett's couch while Zara paced the room. This changes nothing, Zara insisted. We still have the ledger, the email chain, my testimony. But we lost Eleanor's evidence, I said, running my fingers through my hair. And now Selena's threatening to force me out completely. She's scared, Beckett said, bringing us coffee. Think about it. If everything was really legal, why threaten you at all? Because she's a bully, Zara spat. Always has been. Remember when she fired Maria for asking about the missing inventory records? I looked up sharply. Missing inventory records? From the warehouse where they're storing supplies for the new locations. Zara nodded. Maria said the numbers didn't add up, and the next day she was gone. Beckett leaned forward, his expression intense. You thinking what I'm thinking? I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Maria? It's Faith. We need to talk about those inventory records. Sometimes the best revenge doesn't come from attacking your enemy. It comes from letting them create their own downfall. The warehouse is on Mason Street, Maria said, spreading a map across Zara's kitchen table. Loading docks in the back, usually unmanned after 6. Her hands trembled slightly as she marked the location. You don't have to do this, I told her. Selena already fired you once. Maria's jaw tightened. She didn't just fire me. She threatened to blacklist me from every bakery in the city if I talked about what I saw. I have 3 kids to feed. I had to leave the industry completely. Beckett studied the warehouse layout. Security cameras? Basic system, mainly focused on the entrance, Maria replied. But I still have the code to the side door. They never changed it after I left. Zara poured more coffee, her expression grim. The real question is, what exactly are we looking for? Discrepancies, I said. Maria noticed the inventory numbers didn't match the supplier invoices. We need proof that Selena's shell companies aren't actually delivering what they're charging for. I can help with that, a new voice said. We all jumped as Vincent stepped into the kitchen. Beckett had called him for legal advice, but I hadn't expected him to show up in person. This is technically breaking and entering, Vincent warned, accepting a coffee from Zara. But if you happen to find evidence of fraud while legitimately checking inventory as a partial owner, he left the sentence hanging. I still have access to the inventory system, I added. Selena never revoked it. Probably didn't think I knew how to use it. Typical, Zara snorted. She always underestimated you. Remember when she told your dad you'd never master his sourdough recipe? I smiled despite myself. Yeah, and then I won that artisanal bread competition 3 years in a row. Focus, people, Beckett interrupted. We need a solid plan. The grand reopening is in 2 weeks. Vincent pulled out his phone. I have a contact at the Financial Crimes Unit. One anonymous tip with concrete evidence, and they'll coordinate with the health department for a surprise inspection during the reopening. But we have to be careful, Maria cautioned. Selena's partner, Frankie, he's not just some businessman. I overheard things. He has connections. What kind of connections? I asked. Maria glanced around nervously. Let's just say some of his other businesses aren't exactly legitimate. That's why I got so scared when they threatened me. The room fell silent as we absorbed this information. Beckett reached for my hand under the table, squeezing it reassuringly. We can back out, he said quietly. Find another way. I shook my head. No, this isn't just about the bakery anymore. How many other people has she hurt? Maria, Eleanor's betrayal, Zara's firing. It's a pattern. It needs to stop. Then let's do this right, Vincent said. He pulled out a legal pad. First, we need a timeline. Maria, when do the deliveries usually come in? Tuesday nights around 8. They're always short on inventory, but the paperwork shows full deliveries. Perfect, Zara said. That's when we'll document everything. Photos, videos, the works. I'll create a distraction at the front, Beckett offered. Make it look like I'm having car trouble near the security camera. We spent the next hour planning every detail. Vincent took notes, occasionally offering legal perspectives that helped us stay just within the law. By the time we finished, the sun was setting. "One more thing," Vincent said as we prepared to leave. "Faith, are you absolutely sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back. This could tear your family apart permanently." I pulled Mom's apron string from my pocket, running the worn fabric between my fingers. Selena tore our family apart the day she decided profit was more important than everything our parents built. Besides, I managed a small smile. Mom always said the truth rises like good bread. You can't keep it down forever. "Speaking of bread," Zara said suddenly, "I almost forgot. Look what I found in the storage room before Selena fired me." She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a familiar-looking recipe box. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were dozens of recipe cards in Mom's handwriting, including her secret sourdough starter instructions. She was going to throw them out, Zara explained. Said they were taking up valuable space. I clutched the box to my chest, fighting back tears. "Thank you." "All right," Beckett said, checking his watch. "Tuesday night, 8 o'clock. Everyone knows their roles?" We all nodded. As we left Zara's apartment, I felt a mix of determination and fear. The recipe box under my arm reminded me of everything at stake. Not just the business, but our family's legacy, our community's trust, and the simple truth that some things matter more than money. "Ready?" Beckett asked as we walked to our cars. "Ready," I replied. And for the first time since this all began, I actually meant it. "Cars in position." Beckett's voice crackled through my earpiece. "Security guards watching me mess with the engine. You're clear." I glanced at Zara beside me in the darkness. We crouched behind the warehouse's dumpsters, waiting for Maria's signal. The night air smelled like rain and diesel fumes. "Delivery truck approaching," Maria whispered through the comm. She was stationed at the corner, pretending to wait for a bus. "Right on schedule." My heart pounded as we watched the truck back up to the loading dock. Two men jumped out, neither bothering to check the manifest, as they started unloading pallets. "Now," Zara mouthed, and we slipped through the side door using Maria's code. The warehouse was dimly lit and maze-like. We followed Maria's map to the inventory storage area, our footsteps echoing despite our attempts to stay quiet. The sound of the delivery continuing outside covered most of our noise. "Found it," Zara whispered, pointing to a stack of boxes marked with Selena's new supplier labels. I pulled out my phone and started documenting everything. Batch numbers, quantities, dates. "Faith," Zara called softly. "Look at this." She'd opened one of the boxes. Inside, instead of the premium European flour Selena claimed to be importing, was basic wholesale flour with the original labels removed. "They're repackaging cheap ingredients," I breathed, snapping photos. "Charging premium prices for bottom-shelf products." "Guys," Beckett's urgent voice came through the earpiece. "We've got a problem. Selena just pulled into the parking lot." My blood ran cold. "What? She never comes here at night." "She's not alone," Maria added. "There's a man with her. Looks like Frankie." "Get out," Vincent's voice cut in. He was parked nearby as our backup. "Now." But before we could move, voices echoed from the loading dock entrance. Zara grabbed my arm and pulled me behind a tall stack of pallets. We pressed ourselves against the boxes, barely breathing. "The numbers aren't adding up, Frankie," Selena's voice carried through the warehouse. "The health department's been asking questions." "That's why we're here," a male voice responded. "Time to clean house before the reopening. Can't have any loose ends." Their footsteps grew closer. Through a gap in the boxes, I could see Selena's designer heels and a pair of expensive men's shoes. "What about your sister?" Frankie asked. "Vincent called me today, asking about the supplier contracts." "Faith's harmless," Selena said, but her voice wavered. "She doesn't have the spine for a real fight. Can't take chances. This expansion's worth millions. If anyone traces the money back to my other businesses." "I'll handle Faith," Selena cut in sharply. "She's family." Frankie laughed, the sound sending chills down my spine. "Family! Sweetheart, You sold out your family the minute you signed with me. Speaking of which, there was a rustling of papers. Sign these, Frankie continued. Transfers the remaining shares to our holding company. Once they're filed, your sister won't have any legal right to interfere. My hand tightened around my phone, still recording everything. Beside me, Zara's eyes were wide with horror. These need to be notarized, Selena said. Already taken care of. My guy's very accommodating. A phone rang. Selena's ringtone. It's Eleanor. Yes? What? When? Her voice rose in panic. What do you mean auditors are coming tomorrow? The reopening's not for 2 weeks. I could practically hear Frankie's scowl. You said you had everyone on your payroll. I did. Someone must have tipped them off. We need to move everything. Tonight. Frankie's voice turned harsh. Get your people here. Empty the warehouse. And Selena? If this goes wrong, remember, you're not the only one with family to protect. Their footsteps retreated, followed by urgent phone calls. As soon as the voices faded, Zara tugged my arm. We have to go, now. We crept toward the side door, every shadow seeming to hide a threat. Just as we reached it, my phone buzzed loudly. I'd forgotten to silence it after recording. Who's there? Frankie's voice boomed. Run! Zara hissed. We burst through the door into the rain that had started falling. Behind us, I heard shouts and running footsteps. Car, now! Beckett yelled through the earpiece. We sprinted across the parking lot, shoes splashing through puddles. Vincent's car appeared at the corner, doors already open. We dove in as engines roared behind us. Did you get what we needed? Vincent asked, accelerating away from the warehouse. I held up my phone, hands shaking. Everything, including Frankie threatening Selena and admitting to fraud. Good, Vincent said grimly, because after tonight, there's no going back. You heard those threats. This is bigger than we thought. I looked at my phone, at the evidence that could destroy my sister's life. What have we gotten ourselves into? Too late to ask that now, Zara said, squeezing my hand. The question is, what do we do next? The rain pounded against the windows as Vincent drove us into the night, away from the warehouse, but straight toward a confrontation that would change everything. The morning of the grand reopening dawned bright and clear. I stood across the street from the bakery, watching the crowd gather for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Local news crews set up their cameras while Selena worked the crowd, all perfect smile and rehearsed charm. Auditors are in position, Vincent murmured beside me. Health department, too. They're waiting for my signal. Look at her, I said, watching Selena pose for photos. She has no idea what's coming. Faith! Selena's voice carried across the street. She waved, beckoning me over. Come join your family for the big moment. Beckett squeezed my shoulder. Showtime. I crossed the street, forcing a smile as Selena pulled me into a tight hug for the cameras. Wouldn't want my little sister to miss this historic moment, she announced loudly. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied, matching her fake enthusiasm. The mayor stepped up to make a speech about small businesses and family tradition. I barely heard him, too focused on the unmarked car pulling up behind the crowd. 2 people in suits stepped out, carrying briefcases. And now, the mayor concluded, I'll let Selena say a few words before the official ribbon cutting. Selena stepped up to the microphone, radiant in her designer suit. When our parents started this bakery 30 years ago, excuse me, a firm voice cut through the crowd. The suited figures pushed forward, badges glinting. I'm Agent Roberts with the Financial Crimes Unit. We need to speak with management immediately. The crowd murmured. Selena's smile flickered but held. Surely this can wait. We're in the middle of... This can't wait, the second agent said, producing documents. We have a warrant to examine your financial records and inventory. There must be some mistake, Selena laughed nervously, but I saw her eyes darting around, looking for escape routes. No mistake, a new voice called out. Frankie pushed through the crowd, his face dark with rage. You said you handled this. The news crews swung their cameras toward the unfolding drama. Selena's perfect mask cracked. "If you'll just step inside," Agent Roberts said firmly. "We have some questions about your supplier relationships and certain financial discrepancies." I can explain everything," Selena said, but Frankie was already backing away. "Ms. Sanders," the health inspector stepped forward, "we've also received concerning reports about your inventory sources and storage practices." The crowd watched in stunned silence as Selena's world began to crumble. She grabbed my arm, nails digging in. "What did you do?" she hissed. "Me?" I pulled away. "I just followed the money, sis, like you taught me." "You don't understand what you've done," she whispered frantically. "Frankie's people are already being investigated." Vincent stepped forward, badge in hand. "Did you really think I was just a family lawyer? Financial Crimes has been watching Frankie's operation for months. You led us right to him." Selena's face went pale. Behind her, I saw Frankie trying to slip away, only to be stopped by more agents emerging from the crowd. "The books," Selena said desperately. "If I cooperate, are right here." I pulled out Dad's ledger and handed it to Agent Roberts, along with records of every fraudulent transaction, every shell company, and every threat Frankie made. The next hour passed in a blur of badges, handcuffs, and camera flashes. The crowd watched as Selena and Frankie were led away, their perfect facades finally shattered. The news crews got more drama than they'd bargained for. "Faith!" Beckett called from the bakery doorway. "You need to see this." Inside, health inspectors were examining boxes of repackaged ingredients. Eleanor stood in the corner, looking shell-shocked. "I didn't know," she kept saying. "About Frankie, about the threats. I thought it was just creative accounting." "Save it for your statement," Vincent told her firmly. I walked through the bakery, past the new modern decor and corporate signage, until I reached the kitchen. Zara was already there, pulling Mom's recipe box from her bag. "Ready to start fresh?" she asked. I ran my hand along the stainless steel counters, remembering all the mornings I'd watched Dad knead dough here, all the lessons he'd taught me about patience and integrity. "First," I said, "we're bringing back the old ovens. Real bread needs real heat." The bell above the door chimed. Mrs. Chen walked in, looking confused at all the commotion. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "I came for Tommy's birthday cake." I smiled, reaching for my apron. "Mrs. Chen, how would you like to watch me decorate it? Just like old times?" Outside, the cameras were still rolling, capturing the fall of Selena's empire. But in the kitchen, with flour dust catching the morning light and the promise of fresh beginnings, I finally felt like I was home. "All rise," the bailiff called out. The courtroom rustled as everyone stood. I smoothed my skirt, heart pounding as Selena was led in, wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of her usual designer clothes. "How does the defendant plead?" the judge asked. "Guilty, Your Honor," Selena's lawyer responded. "My client wishes to cooperate fully in exchange for consideration during sentencing." I felt Beckett's hand squeeze mine as we watched from the gallery. The prosecutor stood, reading out the charges. Fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. Each count felt like another nail in the coffin of our family relationship. "Ms. Sanders," the judge addressed Selena directly, "before we proceed with sentencing, do you have anything to say to the court?" Selena turned, her eyes finding mine in the crowd. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the sister I used to know. "I'd like to address my sister," she said, her voice cracking. "Faith?" I stood, my legs shaking. "I thought I was protecting our legacy," Selena began. "Dad's way of running things. It was beautiful, but I watched him struggle every month to make payroll. I convinced myself I could do better, be smarter. Then Frankie showed me how to make real money, and it was so easy to justify each step. By stealing? I couldn't help asking. By threatening people? I never meant for it to go that far." Tears streaked her makeup. "Frankie's connections. Once I was in, there was no getting out. But I should have trusted you. Should have remembered what Mom always said about honest bread and honest lives." The judge cleared his throat. Given your cooperation in the ongoing investigation into Mr. Joseph's criminal enterprise and your assistance in recovering the fraudulently obtained funds, this court sentences you to 4 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. The gavel struck. Selena turned to face the bailiff, but not before I saw her shoulders shake with silent sobs. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Faith, how do you feel about your sister's sentence? Will you keep the bakery open? Any comment on the ongoing investigation? Vincent appeared, creating a path through the crowd. Ms. Sanders has no comment at this time. The bakery will release an official statement tomorrow. He ushered us into his waiting car, where Zara sat ready with coffee and pastries. Proper ones, made that morning in our kitchen. 4 years, I said, still processing. It doesn't feel real. Could have been worse, Vincent reminded me. Her testimony is helping build cases against Frankie's entire network. Speaking of which, he handed me a thick envelope. The restitution payment cleared. The bakery is officially yours. All of it. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were the ownership papers, now showing me as sole proprietor of Sanders Family Bakery. What are you going to do? Beckett asked softly. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. At the bakery. Need to talk. Let's find out, I said. We found Eleanor in the kitchen, wearing her old apron, pulling a tray of croissants from the oven. The smell of butter and fresh bread filled the air. I know I have no right to be here, she said quickly, but I needed to explain. You were trying to protect yourself, I said. I understand that now. No, Eleanor shook her head. I was trying to protect both of you. I thought if I played along, kept records of everything, eventually. She pulled a USB drive from her pocket. I documented everything, from the beginning. That's how Vincent's team built their case so quickly. You were the original whistleblower, Zara realized. Eleanor nodded. I watched you girls grow up in this kitchen. I couldn't let Frankie's people destroy everything your parents built. I looked around the kitchen, at the worn spots on the floor where Dad used to stand kneading dough, at Mom's handwritten recipes now proudly displayed on the wall, at the team of people who'd fought to preserve what really mattered. Well, I said, reaching for my apron, those croissants aren't going to serve themselves. Eleanor, you remember how Mom used to arrange the morning display? Like it was yesterday, she smiled, wiping her eyes. Zara, can you start the sourdough for tomorrow? Beckett, we'll need your help with deliveries. What about the statement for the press? Vincent asked. I picked up Mom's old rolling pin, feeling its familiar weight. Tell them the truth. Sanders Family Bakery is returning to its roots. Honest bread, honest lives, no shortcuts. Through the kitchen window, I could see the morning sun lighting up our storefront. The sign still needed repainting, and we had a lot of trust to rebuild with our customers. But as I watched Eleanor teaching our new apprentice how to properly laminate dough, I knew we'd get there, one loaf at a time. Faith? Beckett called from the front. Mrs. Chen is here, says she needs a wedding cake consultation for Tommy's big day. I smiled, dusting flour from my hands. Some things change, some stay the same, and sometimes the best revenge is simply doing things right. The prison visiting room smelled like cheap coffee and disinfectant. I sat at the metal table, watching Selena approach in her orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back simply, face free of makeup. She looked more like the sister I remembered from childhood than she had in years. You came, she said, sitting down. I wasn't sure you would. I brought something. I pulled out a paper bag, sliding it across the table. The guard had already checked it. Made it this morning. Selena opened the bag and inhaled deeply. Sourdough, Dad's recipe. Mom's, actually. Found it in her recipe box. I watched as she broke off a piece, tears forming in her eyes as she tasted it. Still rising perfectly after all these years. Just like she used to make, Selena whispered. God, I missed this. The bakery misses you too, I said quietly. The real you, I mean. The sister who used to help me practice piping roses until my hands cramped. She wiped her eyes. How's business? Honest, I smiled. We're not making millions, but we're making enough. Eleanor's training 2 new apprentices. Zara's running the kitchen like Mom used to. All heart, no shortcuts. And Beckett? Proposed last week. In the kitchen, covered in flour. Selena laughed softly. Of course he did. She hesitated, then reached into her prison uniform pocket. I have something for you, too. She pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges. I recognized Dad's handwriting immediately. Where did you get this? Found it in his office the day he died. It's his original business plan for the bakery. She pushed it across the table. Read it. I unfolded the paper carefully. At the top, in Dad's bold scrawl, Sanders Family Bakery, a legacy of trust. Keep reading, Selena urged. This bakery isn't about making money, I read aloud. It's about making memories. Every loaf of bread, every birthday cake, every morning pastry is a chance to be part of someone's story. My daughters will inherit this legacy someday. I hope they remember that true success isn't measured in dollars, but in the smiles of customers who become family. I forgot that part, Selena said, her voice thick with emotion. About the smiles. I was so focused on the numbers, I forgot about the people. It's not too late, I told her. When you get out. No. She shook her head firmly. The bakery is yours now. You're the one who stayed true to Dad's vision. She took a shaky breath. I just want my sister back. I reached across the table, taking her hand. You never lost her. The guard called time. As Selena stood, she squeezed my hand one last time. Make Dad proud, Faith, and save me a job washing dishes when I get out. Better start practicing your rose piping. I smiled through tears. We've got a reputation to maintain. Back at the bakery, I found Beckett and Zara waiting. The evening sun streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes that danced in the air like falling flour. How'd it go? Beckett asked, pulling me close. I showed them Dad's business plan. As they read it, Eleanor emerged from the kitchen with a fresh batch of chocolate chip cookies. Mom's secret recipe. Perfect timing, she said, setting them down. The evening regulars will be here soon. Right on cue, the bell chimed. Mrs. Chen walked in with Tommy and his new wife, followed by the usual after-work crowd. The smell of fresh cookies filled the air as people gathered, sharing stories and breaking bread together. I watched from behind the counter as Eleanor showed Tommy's wife how to properly dunk the cookies, just like she'd shown us as kids. Zara discussed wedding cake designs with a young couple while Beckett rang up orders, remembering everyone's usual purchases without asking. Dad's business plan sat open beside the register, his words catching the last rays of sunlight. A legacy of trust. Faith! Mrs. Chen called out. Come tell Sophie about the time you and Selena tried to make blue bread for the 4th of July. I laughed, joining their table. Well, we were 10 and 12, and Mom had just taught us about food coloring. As I shared the story, watching smiles spread and crumbs scatter, I realized Dad had been right all along. Success wasn't in the profit margins or expansion plans. It was right here, in the simple act of bringing people together, one honest loaf at a time. The bakery's warmth wrapped around us like a familiar embrace, and in that moment, I knew. This was exactly where I was meant to be. Not just carrying on a legacy, but building one of my own, with plenty of room for second chances and fresh starts. After all, that's what good bread and good families are all about.